Logan's truck roared down the icy road, slicing through the biting wind and relentless snowfall. The highway, desolate under the storm's fury, was sparsely populated, with only a handful of daring souls braving the tempestuous weather. Occasionally, a solitary car would dart past, quickly swallowed by the swirling snow, its tail lights fading into the white abyss. Inside the truck's warm embrace, Logan's eyes flicked to a photograph of Harper, his wife, dangling from the rearview mirror. Her smile, captured in that small frame, warmed his heart. With Christmas just around the corner, his excitement was palpable. After months of crisscrossing the nation, he was on the final leg of his journey home, bearing a special gift for Harper. Logan's hand reached into the glove compartment, retrieving a small, elegantly wrapped box. He stole a quick glance inside. The gold necklace he had chosen for Harper lay nestled among festive decorations, its luster a promise of joy. Smiling, he carefully placed the box back, his heart swelling with anticipation. He pressed the accelerator, urging the truck onward through the thickening snow as it barreled towards the twinkling lights of the city. Upon reaching the truck stop, Logan parked and decided to walk the remaining distance. Strolling through the streets, a sense of nostalgia enveloped him. The town had transformed since his departure. Gone were the autumn days, shadowed by gloom. Now, even under a grey sky, there was a palpable warmth. People bustled about, faces bright with festive cheer, pausing to admire the mistletoe and holiday decorations adorning shop windows. Logan's steps quickened, eager to return to Harper and begin their Christmas celebrations together. He imagined the moment he would surprise her with the gift, the laughter and love that would fill their home. The thought spurred him on, each step a beat in the rhythm of his homecoming. As Logan strolled into the bustling apartment complex, the familiar chorus of neighborhood life enveloped him. He nodded with a warm smile at the neighbors who bustled by, their footsteps echoing against the concrete walls. "Evening, Mr. Thompson," he called out to the elderly man shuffling past. Mr. Thompson looked up, his wrinkled face breaking into a grin. "Evening, Logan. Lovely weather, isn't it?" "Not too bad at all," Logan agreed, his eyes following a young mother struggling with a baby carriage at the foot of the stairs. Without a second thought, he approached her. "Hey, let me help you with that." The mother, a hint of relief in her weary eyes, gave him a grateful nod. "Thank you so much. These stairs are a nightmare with this thing." Together, they carefully maneuvered the carriage up the narrow staircase, the baby gurgling happily, unaware of the effort. As they reached the third floor, she thanked him again. Logan paused outside his door, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Quietly, he pressed the doorbell and quickly sidestepped behind the wall, his heart beating with the thrill of the surprise he had planned for Harper. He imagined her opening the door, her eyes searching, then lighting up as she spotted him. But seconds turned to minutes, and the anticipated laughter and shouts of surprise never came. Instead, silence hung heavy. Confusion creased Logan's brow as he stepped back into view, pressing the bell again, a sense of unease creeping up his spine. "Harper!" he called out, his voice echoing faintly in the empty hallway. "You there?" The unanswered echoes only deepened the knot of worry in his stomach. Logan's playful anticipation dissolved into a cold, gnawing concern. He reached for the doorknob, his mind racing with possibilities of why Harper hadn't answered. Perplexed, and with a growing frown etching his face, Logan fumbled through his pockets, his fingers finally closing around the cool metal of his keys. The lock clicked open with an eerie finality, amplifying his unease. "Hello! Is anyone home?" he called out, stepping into the dark, unwelcoming hallway. His voice, tinged with a feigned cheerfulness, echoed back at him. "I'm home! Surprise, my love!" But the apartment answered with nothing but silence. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of disuse. Without bothering to remove his shoes, a habit he had picked up from Harper, Logan moved through the apartment with hesitant steps. The living room was as he remembered, yet unnervingly still. The cushions on the couch untouched, the television screen a blank, dark eye. "Harper?" he tried again, his voice now a whisper of hope fading into the shadows. The kitchen, usually the heart of their home, was cold and lifeless. No dirty dishes in the sink, no lingering aromas of their last cooked meal. Even the fridge hummed a lonely tune, its door plastered with grocery lists and reminders, now irrelevant. Finally, he pushed open the bedroom door, the last bastion of hope in his search. The bed was neatly made, the sheets smooth and untouched, as if waiting for an occupant that never came. His heart sank. It was the layer of dust, undisturbed and thick, that told the true story. It coated every surface, a silent testament to the days, maybe even weeks, of Harper's absence. Logan's mind raced with questions, each more unsettling than the last. Where could she have gone without a word? Why hadn't she contacted him? Logan's heart pounded with growing alarm. He hastily retrieved his phone, only to find its screen stubbornly dark, the battery life exhausted. A surge of frustration washed over him as he tossed the phone aside, its clatter a stark contrast to the suffocating silence of the apartment. His steps quickened to the landline on the table, desperation fueling his movements. But what awaited him, there was not a means to an answer, but the end of all his questions. His eyes fell upon a note, the letters unmistakably in Harper's familiar, flowing script. "I'm sorry, it didn't work out," he read aloud, each word a sharp jab to his heart. "I realized I deserve more. I met someone else and have found happiness. I wish you the same. Goodbye." The word goodbye echoed in his mind, a cruel, final whisper. His hands trembled as he crumpled the paper, the ink-smudged words contorting under the pressure of his grip. With a guttural cry of anguish, he hurled it against the wall, the paper's flight pathetically brief, yet its impact resonating through the empty rooms. "What does that even mean?" Logan's voice cracked as he sank onto the couch, the cushions absorbing his weight but not his despair. The room offered no reply, no comfort. Only Harper, now a ghost in his memories, held the keys to his swirling storm of questions. In the haunting stillness, he noticed how little of her remained. The apartment felt gutted, stripped of its warmth and life. Yet, amidst this void, a faint, almost ethereal scent lingered. Harper's perfume. It wafted from the half-open wardrobe, a cruel reminder of her presence, now so painfully absent. Lost in a whirlwind of memories, Logan's mind wandered back to the place where it all began. Harper's workplace, a bustling fast-food restaurant with neon lights that seemed to never dim. He remembered how, 2 years ago, their paths had unexpectedly crossed in that very spot. Harper had been a newcomer then, her eyes wide with the mix of excitement and trepidation that the city often sparked in those who came from quieter, smaller places. It was during one of his frequent visits to the restaurant that Logan first noticed her. She fumbled with the cash register, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as a line of impatient customers grew. Logan had stepped up to the counter, his usual order on his lips, but it was her flustered apology that caught his attention. "I'm so sorry, I'm still trying to get the hang of this," she had stammered, her gaze flicking nervously to her new co-workers. Logan had offered her a reassuring smile. "No worries, takes a bit to get used to the rhythm of this place. I'm Logan, by the way." Harper, she had responded, a tentative smile breaking through her anxiety. From that day on, their interactions grew. Logan found himself visiting the restaurant more often, each time sharing bits of advice about the city. "You know, the best coffee place is just 2 blocks from here," he had once told her. "And if you ever get lost, just look for the big mural on 5th Street. It's a good landmark." Their bond deepened, conversations flowing as smoothly as the city's endless rhythm. They fell in love amidst the clatter of trays and the sizzle of fries, an unlikely romance blooming in the most ordinary of places. They married, full of dreams and promises of a forever entwined future. But now, as Logan stood outside the restaurant, its neon sign flickering like a beacon of lost dreams, all that remained of their life together was the echo of her laughter in his mind and the crumpled note lying forgotten under the sofa. He pushed open the door, the familiar jingle of the entrance bell sounding almost mocking in its cheerfulness. He stepped inside, his heart heavy, each step a journey back into a past that felt both so close and yet irretrievably lost. The moment Logan stepped into the restaurant, the cashier's usual cheerful demeanor vanished. Recognizing Logan, his smile faltered, replaced by a look of uneasy recognition. The staff at the restaurant had come to know Logan well as Harper's husband, their bond celebrated and witnessed by many of them at their wedding. Logan approached the counter, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Hey, is Harper working today?" he asked, trying to sound casual. The cashier, a young guy named Joseph, whom Logan had always found friendly and talkative, now seemed lost for words. He hesitated, his eyes darting nervously before he mumbled something indistinct. "Sorry, what was that?" Logan leaned in, trying to catch his words. Joseph glanced over his shoulder, then hurriedly disappeared into the back. When he returned a minute later, his discomfort was palpable. "She, stepped out?" Joseph said, avoiding Logan's gaze. "Stepped out? To where?" Logan pressed, sensing something amiss. "I don't know, Logan," Joseph replied, sounding genuinely apologetic. "That's all the manager said." Logan's request to speak with the manager seemed to hang in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. When Lucy, the manager, approached, her expression was one of sympathy, her eyes reflecting a sorrow that immediately set off alarms in Logan's mind. "Hey, Logan," Lucy greeted him, her voice tinged with a softness that was uncharacteristic for the usually brisk manager. "What can I do for you?" For a moment, Logan was silent, his gaze searching Lucy's face for any clue, any hint of Harper's whereabouts or state of mind. "I'm sorry, Logan," Lucy finally said, her voice low and earnest. "She was here earlier, but she left in a hurry. I'm not even sure if she's coming back." As Logan stepped out of the restaurant, the crisp, cold air bit at his skin, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere he had just left behind. He wasn't there to plead or to pull Harper back into a life she had chosen to leave. His heart sought answers, a balm for the gaping wound of her sudden departure. His feet moved almost of their own accord, thoughts swirling in a maelstrom of confusion and hurt. Harper's co-workers, he realized, must have sensed the undercurrents of her discontent, yet they remained silent, protective of her privacy even in her absence. The city streets, once a canvas of their shared life, now felt alien and cold. He found himself, almost unconsciously, drawn towards a place etched with happier memories. It was there, amidst the grandeur of old architecture and the quaint charm of a cozy French restaurant, that they had once celebrated love, basking in the warmth of each other's company. Lost in a sea of reminiscence, Logan's heart jolted as a familiar figure emerged from the restaurant. It was Harper, her graceful movements unmistakable even from a distance. She walked towards a silver Mercedes where a well-dressed man stood holding the door open for her. Recognition dawned with a bitter taste. The man was Miles, Harper's boss, known for his imposing stature and bald head. A flurry of emotions gripped Logan: shock, betrayal, a piercing sense of reality unraveling. Time seemed to slow as Harper slid into the car, the scene unfolding like a tableau of his deepest fears coming to life. Logan stood there, rooted to the spot, the chill of the air now inconsequential compared to the icy grip of realization in his heart. Miles, a figure shrouded in rumors and whispers. Logan had heard the stories, the dark murmurs of a past tainted with money laundering and possible ties to criminal organizations. It was said that Miles had used his dubious fortune to transition into a life of ostentatious legitimacy, opening several high-end restaurants, including the one Harper had just exited. In the city's collective consciousness, Miles occupied a space that was both feared and respected. His wealth and connections cast a long shadow, one that many chose not to step out of. But respect born of fear and wealth was a fragile thing, Logan thought bitterly. It lacked the foundation of genuine admiration or moral integrity. As Logan's shock began to settle into a deep, aching sense of betrayal, he couldn't help but grapple with the question that gnawed at him. Why Harper? Why had she, who had always seemed to value honesty and decency, chosen to leave him for a man like Miles? The cold truth settled in his heart, like lead. It wasn't just the loss of Harper that tormented him. It was the shattering of his understanding of who she was. The Harper he had known, who had laughed and dreamed by his side, now seemed like a stranger, her choices an enigma wrapped in the allure of a life Logan could not comprehend. In a burst of desperation, Logan lunged forward, his feet slipping slightly on the slush-covered pavement. His heart pounded in his chest, a futile hope propelling him towards the sleek Mercedes as it merged seamlessly into the flow of traffic. But it was too late. The car, a symbol of the new life Harper had chosen, disappeared around a corner, its tail lights blinking briefly before being swallowed by the city's labyrinth. Left standing in the dirty snow, Logan's breath formed clouds of steam in the frigid air, each puff a visual echo of his fading chances. He pulled his hat down over his ears, a meager shield against the biting cold. His hood came up next, enveloping him in a cocoon of fabric and shadow. With his head bowed against the chill, Logan began to walk, his steps quick and purposeful. The crowded sidewalk seemed to close in around him, each passerby an oblivious actor in the backdrop of his unraveling world. For days, Logan found himself adrift in a haze of alcohol, the sharp edges of reality blurred into a numbing fog. The confines of the apartment, once a shared sanctuary, now echoed with the ghosts of memories, each room a reminder of a life that had slipped through his fingers. In these solitary hours, his mind teetered on the brink of dreams and waking nightmares. He would startle at the slightest sound, his heart lurching with a hope that refused to die. The creak of the floorboards, the whisper of the wind against the windows, every noise seemed like the herald of Harper's return. Each time, he found himself propelled by a desperate optimism, rushing to the hallway with a fervor that belied his despair. But the doorway remained empty, a silent testament to his abandonment. In these moments, Logan's knees would buckle and he would sink to the floor, the cold tiles an unforgiving witness to his grief. His fist would collide with the ground, a physical release for the emotional tempest raging inside him. Each thud echoed in the hollow space, a stark counterpoint to the quiet he couldn't escape. In a moment of alcohol-fueled delirium, he thought he saw Harper's face peering in through the window, her smile a haunting mirage. His heart lurched as he clambered onto the ledge, fingers fumbling with the latch, the perilous drop from the 4th floor a mere afterthought. It was only the ghost of a breeze and the empty night that greeted him, the vision of Harper dissolving into the darkness, his life teetering on the edge both literally and metaphorically, might have spiraled further if not for the intervention of Mr. Thompson, his elderly neighbour from downstairs. The incessant noise had finally drawn the old man to Logan's door in the early hours of Christmas morning. Logan, bleary-eyed and dishevelled, swayed slightly as he opened the door. "Oh, it's you, Mr. Thompson," he yawned, his voice heavy with fatigue. "What are you doing up this early?" Mr. Thompson glanced at his watch, the digits reading 3:20 a.m. "Well, I came to wish you a Merry Christmas," he said, his tone casual as he stepped past Logan into the apartment. His eyes quickly took in the scene of disarray, the bottles that littered the living room, the unwashed dishes, the stale air of neglect. Logan followed him in, a flush of shame colouring his cheeks. "I'm tired of this," he admitted, running a hand through his unkempt hair. He wiped his face with a t-shirt, trying to erase the evidence of his recent breakdown. "I don't feel much like celebrating. Feels more like mourning," he confessed, his voice a low murmur. "My wife left me and I've been drinking. Care to join, Mr. Thompson?" Logan offered, handing him a glass of whiskey. Mr. Thompson accepted the glass of whiskey, his hand steady as he took a thoughtful sip. He settled into the armchair, a silent invitation for Logan to unburden his heart. As Logan slumped onto the couch, the words poured out, the tangled story of his relationship with Harper unraveling in the dim light of the living room. Logan's voice wavered with a mix of confusion and pain as he recounted the details. The breakup, the note, the fragments of their shared life now lying in disarray. Was I making good money? Hell yeah, I was. Not as much as her new boyfriend, but not too bad either. Did I take her to Cancun? I sure did. Gifts. Tons, he rattled off, a list of what he thought were proofs of his love and commitment. I don't know, man. Maybe I did miss something after all. I gave her everything she needed, Logan continued, his gaze lost in the middle distance, searching for answers in the shadows of the room. Or maybe it's because I'm an orphan. He mused a lewd, his voice tinged with a vulnerability seldom expressed. Sure, I grew up in an orphanage with no parents, but that's not my fault. Mr. Thompson listened intently, his expression one of empathy. He took another sip of whiskey, the liquid burning a trail down his throat as he wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. That's not it, dear Logan, Mr. Thompson replied softly, his head shaking slightly in a gesture of empathy. There are fickle people in this world, Logan. They swear eternal love one day, and the next, they find someone else. It's not just women. Men do it too. I knew a guy who was left by his wife. Then he got up and left the next one he found. Said it was revenge. But who did he really hurt? Himself. Now he's alone, drinking his sorrows away. People, Logan, are strange creatures. Logan listened, each word resonating with a mix of truth and sadness. Mr. Thompson's gaze held him, a silent encouragement to voice his deepest fears. I don't know what to do, Logan admitted, his voice breaking the silence. I loved Harper and she did this to me. Why should I live now? What's the point of living anymore? Mr. Thompson considered his words carefully before responding. Well, Logan, you can just live, for no particular reason. If she left you, she wasn't the one for you. Why grieve for someone who chose not to stay? Think of it as being freed from a burden. If you were drowning and she didn't reach out to help, would you still hold on to her? Life, Logan, is a precious gift. It's meant to be lived, enjoyed. Logan let out a heavy sigh, the weight of Mr. Thompson's words settling in his heart. "I'm sorry for causing you so much trouble," he said, feeling a semblance of clarity piercing through the fog of his despair. "I won't be here tonight. I'm leaving town, so I won't bother you on Christmas Eve," Logan announced, finding his clothes in a disheveled pile and quickly dressing. He made his way to the bathroom to freshen up, the conversation with Mr. Thompson having a more therapeutic effect than he could have imagined. After a while, Mr. Thompson stood, his old bones creaking softly as he moved towards the door. "Merry Christmas," he called out, his voice carrying a warmth that contrasted with the coldness of the apartment. "Merry Christmas," Logan's voice echoed from the bathroom, tinged with a note of bittersweet acknowledgement. As the door closed behind Mr. Thompson, Logan added softly, "I don't know how merry it will be, but we'll see." In the solitude of his apartment, with the dawn of Christmas Day creeping through the windows, Logan faced the first day of a new chapter in his life, one filled with uncertainty, but also a glimmer of hope, thanks to the unexpected wisdom of a neighbor. On Christmas Eve, while families huddled together in warmth and celebration, Logan found himself alone, driving his truck down a snow-covered highway. The world outside was a blur of white, the road ahead barely visible through the heavy snowfall. He drove with a kind of desperate urgency, eager to distance himself from the remnants of a life that had unraveled so unexpectedly. The icy road demanded caution, but Logan's mind was elsewhere, lost in a whirlwind of memories and regrets. The empty highway mirrored his own sense of isolation, the stillness of the night, broken only by the occasional burst of fireworks reflecting in his rearview mirror. Seeking some semblance of cheer, Logan turned on the music, the car speakers filling with the sound of festive songs. They were a bittersweet reminder of a time when Christmas brought joy and anticipation. He raised a box of grape juice to his lips, a solitary toast to himself. "Merry Christmas," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the music. As a firework shot up to the left, piercing the darkness with a burst of color, Logan allowed himself a small smile. It was a stark contrast to the joyless Christmases of his difficult childhood, yet those days held a certain nostalgia, a reminder of simpler times when hope seemed more tangible. Christmas had once been a season he cherished, but now it felt like just another day, its magic dulled by the ache in his heart. He whispered a silent holiday greeting to the unseen revelers behind the forest and pressed on the gas pedal, disappearing once more into the snowy expanse. 2 weeks later, as Logan returned to the city, the holiday season had faded into memory. The early January morning was crisp, and his truck joined the flow of cars, signaling a return to routine life. Glancing at the dashboard, he noticed the fuel gauge ominously low. A sign for a nearby gas station appeared just in time, and he turned off the highway, relief washing over him. Pulling up to the gas station, Logan stepped out into the cold, brisk air. He unscrewed the gas cap and then headed towards the building, hoping for a moment of warmth. As he reached for the door, it swung open abruptly, and a man in just a shirt burst out. The man was clearly the cashier, his expression one of alarm and haste. Logan paused, taken aback by the sudden appearance of the man. The scene was oddly jarring, a stark contrast to the quietude of his journey. His eyes followed the cashier, curiosity mingling with concern. The cashier's urgent plea jolted Logan from his initial annoyance, his sarcasm fading as he followed the man inside. The sight that greeted him was startling. A young woman lay on the floor, her face contorted in pain as she clutched her stomach. Logan's eyes widened in alarm. "What the heck? Is she having a baby?" he blurted out, instinctively taking a step back. "Why haven't you called an ambulance?" he demanded, his voice tinged with concern and confusion. "I did. They're on their way. But there's been an accident on the highway. They could be delayed," the cashier explained, his voice laced with panic. Can you take her to the hospital? Your truck might make it through." Without hesitation, Logan nodded, his own troubles momentarily forgotten in the face of this urgent crisis. "I'll take her, but I need at least 30 gallons of diesel," he said, the urgency clear in his tone. "Hurry up!" As the cashier rushed to refuel the truck, Logan gently lifted the woman, his arms steady despite the chaos of the moment. He carefully placed her in the passenger seat of his truck, ensuring she was as comfortable as possible given the circumstances. Once the truck was ready, Logan quickly climbed into the driver's seat, his mind focused on the task at hand. To his surprise, the woman, amidst her pain, turned to him and exclaimed, "Everett, you're alive!" Logan's brow furrowed in confusion, realizing she was likely delirious from the pain. "No, Mom, I'm not Everett. Just hang on, we're going to the hospital," he reassured her, trying to sound calm despite the adrenaline surging through him. He started the truck, the engine roaring to life as he navigated onto the road. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his gaze fixed on the snow-covered path ahead. Each second felt critical, the urgency of the situation lending him a clarity and purpose he hadn't felt in weeks. Logan's truck cut through the city streets, its journey ending at the hospital's emergency entrance. Despite the urgency, he ensured the woman was safely in the hands of the medical staff before leaving, her pained expression and mistaken recognition of him etching in his mind. As he drove back through the quiet city streets, Logan found himself haunted by the woman's gaze, that unshakable conviction she had that he was someone she knew. The intensity of her recognition, even amidst her agony, was unsettling. It made him question the vast, unknown connections between people, the myriad of lives intersecting in ways beyond comprehension. Restless and unable to find solace in sleep, Logan rose at midnight and sought the company of Mr. Thompson. The old man, often awake at late hours since his wife's passing, welcomed Logan with a warm cup of coffee. The dimly lit room, filled with memories and the gentle ticking of an old clock, provided a comforting backdrop as Logan recounted his unexpected role in helping the pregnant stranger. "You should definitely go see her," Mr. Thompson advised, his aged eyes reflecting a lifetime of wisdom. "You never know, it might be important." The suggestion lingered in Logan's mind as they played a quiet game of chess, the pieces moving across the board in thoughtful silence. Later, as Logan lay in bed, the day's events replayed in his mind, a puzzle with missing pieces. The next morning, drawn by a mixture of curiosity and a sense of unfinished business, Logan found himself back at the hospital. As he entered, a nurse spotted him. Her face broke into a wide smile, and she gestured towards him with evident excitement. "Why didn't you tell us you were the father?" she asked, her tone a mix of confusion and mild reproof. Logan's own confusion mirrored hers, but for entirely different reasons. He tried to clarify, his voice a mix of weariness and bewilderment. "I think there's been a mistake," he began, but the nurse, still chuckling, interrupted him. "Your wife said her husband brought her here," she said, flipping through some papers. "You're her husband, aren't you?" Her playful gaze was met with Logan's exhausted shrug. He was too drained to correct her misconception. "Can I see her? I just need to ask her something," Logan requested, his voice heavy with fatigue and frustration. "Not right now. Samantha is resting," the nurse replied, her smile fading into a more professional demeanor. "She lost a lot of blood during childbirth and is in intensive care. You can visit in 3 days." As Logan processed this information, the nurse added, "Don't worry, you'll get to see your child. It's a cute boy, and he's doing well." Logan's mind reeled at the mention of a child, the situation spiraling into realms far beyond his expectations. "So, her name is Samantha," he muttered to himself, a piece of the puzzle falling into place, yet the overall picture remained blurred and confusing. As he left, the nurse's laughter and casual remark about him being strange echoed in his ears. Logan's world, already upended by recent events, seemed to be tilting further off its axis. 3 days later, Logan returned to the hospital, his heart pounding with a mix of curiosity, anxiety, and a strange sense of responsibility. When he met her, he didn't know how to start the conversation for a while, and Samantha just sat there with her eyes wide open in surprise and couldn't say anything. After a moment of silence, Samantha suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, Everett," and hugged him tightly. Logan gently patted her on the back and helped her sit down in a chair, then sat down beside her. As Samantha's sobs subsided into quiet sniffles, Logan listened intently, his own troubles momentarily forgotten. He handed her a glass of water, his movements deliberate and kind. Logan gently sat on the edge of the bed, his voice soft but firm. "I'm sorry, but I don't know who Everett is. My name is Logan," he said, hoping to gently break her illusion. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his driver's license to offer tangible proof. "We met 4 days ago. I was the one who brought you here." He extended the license toward Samantha. Upon seeing it, Samantha's face crumbled, tears welling up and spilling over. She trembled, the reality crashing down on her. "But I had so hoped Everett was still alive," she sobbed, her voice cracking with each word. She leaned into Logan, seeking comfort in a stranger's kindness. "You look so much like him. I thought maybe it was a Christmas miracle," she whispered, her voice trailing off into despair. Once Samantha's tears had subsided into quiet sniffles, Logan handed her a glass of water, his movements slow and considerate. "If you feel up to it, would you tell me what happened to Everett?" he asked gently, his curiosity tinged with empathy. Samantha nodded, taking a tentative sip of water before beginning her story. "Everett, my husband, he looked a lot like you," she started, her voice still unsteady. "He passed away 3 months ago. He was an entrepreneur, passionate about his car service business." She paused, gathering her thoughts. Everything changed when Brooks, an old army friend of Everett's, came back into our lives. Brooks had a rough past, spent time in prison for a fatal fight. He struggled to find work after getting out. Samantha's fingers nervously twisted the edge of the hospital blanket as she recounted the painful memories. Everett wanted to help him, so he offered Brooks a job as a mechanic. But Brooks wasn't satisfied with that. He wanted more, to be a manager. Everett couldn't trust him with that responsibility. Her voice wavered, laden with unshed tears. Brooks resented Everett for it. The tension between them grew day by day. Brooks maintained a veneer of amicability, his true emotions skillfully hidden behind a facade of friendship. But the facade cracked when he extended an invitation to Everett for a weekend fishing trip. Samantha remembered feeling uneasy about it. "I didn't like the idea," she confided, her voice laced with regret. But Everett was ever the optimist. He trusted Brooks and believed he meant no harm. The trip, however, ended in tragedy. Samantha's hands trembled as she recounted the fateful news of Everett's drowning. Brooks claimed Everett fell overboard, entangled in the fishing gear, beyond his help. Her voice was tinged with skepticism. Everyone believed him. After all, who would be out on the river in the early hours of an October morning to witness otherwise? Samantha's eyes, filled with a haunting conviction, met Logan's. But Everett was a strong swimmer, always cautious, always wore a life vest. It didn't make sense. Tears brimmed in her eyes once more, spilling over as Logan reached out to refill her glass with water. "I'm so sorry," Logan murmured, his head bowed in a gesture of shared sorrow. "For your loss, and for all that's happened since." He hesitated before asking his next question. "How did you end up at the gas station without your coat?" Samantha took a deep, steadying breath, wiping her tears. Her voice, when she spoke, was a whisper of vulnerability. "After Everett passed, Brooks wouldn't leave me alone. He came around persistently asking me to marry him, promising to help raise my child." She shook her head, a mix of disbelief and despair in her eyes. "I refused him every time, begged him to leave me be. But he was relentless, always coming back. Then I stopped letting him in. One day, when I came back from the shop, Brooks caught me. He forced me into his car and drove off to the woods. The car broke down there. I tried to run away. Brooks caught my jacket, but I pulled away, leaving the jacket in his hands. After that, everything's a blur. I guess I ran and then just collapsed. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in your truck." Logan nodded, his expression one of understanding, as if the disjointed pieces of a perplexing puzzle had finally clicked into place. He stood, offering a brief, solemn goodbye to Samantha, and began to walk down the dimly lit hospital corridor towards the stairs. Just as he reached the threshold, Samantha's voice, laced with a fragile hope, halted him. "Logan, when I'm discharged, could you take me home? I don't have anyone else to turn to," Samantha implored, her voice barely above a whisper. Without hesitation, Logan replied, "Of course, I'll be there for you." He quickly scribbled down his phone number on a scrap of paper, his handwriting steady despite the turmoil inside. "Call me when you're ready to leave. I'll come as soon as you need me." Samantha's fingers, trembling like autumn leaves, clutched the paper as she slid it into the pocket of her hospital gown. "Thank you," she murmured, her eyes, brimming with unshed tears, locked onto Logan's. "I'll be waiting." Logan turned, his steps echoing softly in the corridor. As he walked away, a shiver coursed through him, a chill that seemed to seep into his very bones, not from the cold, but from the weight of the moment they had just shared. The following day, driven by an unresolved mystery from his past, Logan made his way to the orphanage where he had spent his formative years. The building, a repository of his earliest memories, stood unchanged. Its walls, still painted a vibrant green, were adorned with larger-than-life depictions of superheroes, as if guarding the dreams of the children within. The hallways echoed with the familiar cacophony of youthful energy, yet the faces of the children bore a melancholic resemblance to Logan's own childhood, their eyes flickering with a fragile, almost imperceptible hope. After exchanging brief, nostalgic greetings with a couple of familiar faces from the staff, Logan found himself in the office of the head mistress, Hadley Sawyer. The room was a small capsule of time, with walls lined with photographs of countless children who had passed through these doors. With little preamble, Logan delved into the purpose of his visit, his voice tinged with a mixture of apprehension and urgency as he mentioned Everett. As he spoke, Mrs. Sawyer's demeanor shifted subtly, a shadow crossing her features. She walked to the window, gazing out as if seeking answers in the view beyond. "You weren't alone when you arrived here," she began, her voice lower, tinged with a hint of regret. "You were one of two, tiny infants on a particularly bitter winter day." She paused, her back still turned to Logan. "Those years were tough. We were overrun with abandoned infants and constantly short on space. In the end, we made a difficult decision to keep you here and to give your brother to a childless couple seeking a child." Her reflection in the window wavered as she recounted the past. "I remember when they took your brother away. You cried inconsolably. Everyone tried to comfort you, but the bond between twins, it's something profound. 3 years later, we heard the couple had divorced. Heartbreakingly, they gave up your brother, and he was sent to another orphanage. By then, we were inundated with orphans and didn't have a single bed to spare. That cruel twist of fate tore you two apart. I'm deeply sorry. We should have told you sooner." The revelation crashed over Logan like a tidal wave, leaving him momentarily breathless. He clasped his head in his hands, the enormity of the truth sinking in. "If only I had known about my brother. Everett might still be alive. His wife wouldn't be engulfed in this sorrow. How did everything become so twisted?" His voice was thick with a maelstrom of emotions. Mrs. Sawyer, her silhouette etched against the window light, could only offer a helpless shrug, the weight of decades of decisions and their unintended consequences bearing down on her. "I'm truly sorry, Logan. Some things in life, they're beyond our grasp, beyond our control," she whispered, her voice a mirror echo of regret. Unable to bear the stifling air of revelations and remorse any longer, Logan rose abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He left the office swiftly, each step away feeling like an escape from an invisible burden. The orphanage, once a refuge, now felt like a chamber of lost possibilities. Stepping outside, he drew a deep breath, as if surfacing from the depths of a murky past. The walk home was a blur, his thoughts a jumbled maze, only intermittently interrupted by the habitual glance at his phone. The anticipated call from Samantha, however, remained elusive, adding a layer of anxious anticipation to his already turbulent emotions. The call he had been yearning for arrived with the dawn of the next day. Samantha's voice, a blend of relief and apprehension, broke through the morning stillness, informing Logan of her discharge. With a sense of urgency, Logan hailed a taxi and headed straight to the hospital. Arriving, he found Samantha outside, cradling her son, an image of maternal tenderness against the stark backdrop of the hospital building. As Logan approached, he couldn't help but smile at the sight of the baby's round, innocent face nestled in the crook of Samantha's arm. He reached out, gently tickling the baby's nose with his finger, eliciting a soft, gurgling laugh. "Let's get you home," he said softly, his voice a steady anchor in the midst of their tumultuous lives. He held the car door open for Samantha, a silent vow in his gesture to protect and support them on the uncertain road ahead. Samantha's apartment was nestled in the bustling heart of the city, shadowed by the car service business that her husband Everett had painstakingly built over the years. Now it stood as a symbol of betrayal, usurped by Brooks through deceit and forgery. As they drove past, Samantha's gaze lingered sorrowfully on the familiar building before she shut her eyes in silent despair. Noticing her distress, Logan offered a comforting touch, his hand lightly resting on hers. Upon reaching the apartment complex, Logan paid the taxi fare, and they made their way inside. As they approached, Samantha's grip tightened on her son, her whisper barely audible. "It's him," she said, nodding towards a figure in the distance. Logan shielded his eyes from the glaring sun, Discerning Brooks' tall, gaunt silhouette, he exuded an ominous presence, his long black cloak and dark glasses rendering him almost spectral. Brooks caught sight of Samantha and waved, a chilling casualness in his gesture. Logan swiftly turned away, concealing his face to avoid recognition. Sensing the urgency, Samantha, with her son clutched close, seized Logan's hand and hastened them towards the building, their steps quickening into a near run. Once inside her apartment, she locked the door with a trembling hand, and Logan found himself in a hallway eerily reminiscent of his own. He sank into the sofa in the living room, his eyes wandering across the modest space until they landed on a photograph on the chest of drawers, marked with a black ribbon. A sharp intake of breath escaped him as he saw the face in the picture. It was his twin brother, Everett. The resemblance was uncanny. The same styled black hair, the same deep brown eyes, the same slight curve of the lips. For a fleeting moment, Logan felt as if he was staring into a mirror, seeing his own reflection. The reality of the situation struck him with overwhelming force. It was no wonder Samantha had mistaken him for Everett. They were identical in every conceivable way. If Logan hadn't been privy to the truth beforehand, he might have doubted his own sanity at the sight of this mirror image of himself. The sudden knock at the door sliced through the tense silence of the apartment. Samantha, her movements cautious, peered through the peephole. Her body recoiled instinctively, a silent gasp escaping her lips. Logan, sensing the urgency, approached her. "It's Brooks," she whispered, her voice tinged with fear. "He's relentless. What do we do now?" Logan instructed her to take her son to his room for safety. Meanwhile, he discreetly retrieved his phone, activating the voice recorder with a deft touch. Steadying himself, he opened the door, feigning a calm smile. "Brooks, what brings you here?" Brooks's face drained of color, his body recoiling as if struck. Staggering backward, he nearly lost his balance over the railing. You're supposed to be dead," he stammered, his eyes darting wildly, refusing to settle on Logan. "How did you mean, how did I survive being drowned?" Logan interjected, with deliberate calmness. I threw you off the boat," Brooks confessed, his voice breaking, his posture deflating like a punctured balloon. "You were supposed to be dead," he choked out, his words laced with disbelief and panic. In a swift motion, fueled by a surge of righteous anger, Logan grabbed Brooks by the collar, pulling him close. His other hand delivered a powerful hook across Brooks's face. "I came back for you," Logan hissed into his ear, his voice a menacing whisper. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out about your schemes?" Pushing Brooks against the railing, Logan watched as fear and realization dawned in Brooks's eyes, his body trembling uncontrollably. Brooks crumpled to the floor, a pitiable figure, weeping and broken. "There, you've confessed everything," Logan stated coldly, his gaze unwavering. "Wouldn't it have been easier to come clean from the start? Feel any relief now? Your life's about to change, Brooks, and not for the better. You're already acquainted with prison, aren't you?" After leaving Brooks crumpled on the ground, Logan stepped outside to call the police. Upon their arrival, he presented them with the incriminating evidence, his phone, containing Brooks's unwitting confession. As Brooks slowly collected himself, he unfolded his tale to the officers, detailing his belief that he had successfully murdered Everett. "But I think it's time you knew the truth," Logan interjected with a wry smile, watching as the police escorted Brooks from the building. "I'm not Everett. I'm his twin brother." The revelation struck Brooks like a physical blow. His face contorted with rage, and he snapped, his voice laced with desperation. "I didn't kill anyone!" he shouted, lunging forward in a futile attempt to reclaim control of the narrative. "I was joking! I'm insane! Just spewing nonsense!" One of the officers firmly restrained Brooks, his voice steady and authoritative. "You'll have a chance to explain everything at the station, sir. Let's proceed." As the door shut behind the police and Brooks, Samantha emerged from the apartment, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. Logan recounted the entire ordeal to her, each word lifting a weight off his shoulders. Overwhelmed by the unfolding events, Samantha was unable to hold back her tears. The subsequent investigation into Brooks's actions was a lengthy and complicated affair. The main hurdle for the prosecution was the absence of eyewitnesses to corroborate the account of Everett being pushed overboard. This lack of direct evidence led to delays and cast doubts on the fairness of the trial. Brooks was on the verge of being released due to insufficient evidence when a crucial breakthrough occurred. Logan, driven by a personal quest for justice, managed to unearth two key witnesses, elderly fishermen who had been on the river that fateful morning. They vividly recalled seeing Brooks dispose of the body. Bolstered by their testimony, the court was finally able to pass a severe judgment: 25 years in federal prison for Brooks. As the judge delivered the verdict, Samantha's grip on Logan's hand tightened, a tangible manifestation of her anxiety and hope. Relief washed over her as she heard the decisive words. Brooks would be incarcerated for a substantial period. The long shadow he had cast over her life was finally receding. After the courtroom had emptied, Samantha turned to Logan, her eyes reflecting a mix of gratitude and newfound determination. "Brooks will be behind bars. I can hardly believe it's finally over," she murmured. "But now there's the matter of the car service. I can't bear the thought of it collapsing, yet I'm at a loss on how to manage it. Would you help me with it?" Logan's response came with an assuring smile, a silent promise of support. "Of course I'll handle it," he said, his voice laced with a newfound purpose. "I've been considering a career change anyway. This feels like the right moment, the right opportunity." In a spontaneous surge of emotion, Samantha leaned forward, closing the gap between them with a heartfelt kiss. Logan reciprocated with equal passion, their shared kiss a seal on their unspoken commitment to face the future together. Enveloped in each other's embrace, they became oblivious to the world around them. The cold rain, the blustering wind, all faded into insignificance. For those 10 minutes, amidst the tempest, they found a haven in each other, their kisses a language of shared trials, resilience, and hope. Half a year swiftly passed, and the festive season was upon them once more. Preparations for Christmas were underway, the tree adorned with twinkling lights, gifts wrapped in shimmering paper, and heartfelt wishes whispered into the crisp winter air. Logan and Samantha, united in marriage for 3 months, had been splitting their time between their respective apartments. Yet, this Christmas, they yearned for something different, something special. They decided to celebrate the holiday at the home of their old neighbor, Mr. Thompson. Arriving on Christmas evening, they were greeted by the unmistakable warmth of a home steeped in festive cheer. Mr. Thompson's eyes sparkled with a childlike delight as he watched Samantha's young son, Charlie, playfully entangling himself in strands of tinsel. Overcome with emotion, the old man was visibly moved by the scene. Noticing this, Logan tactfully engaged him in opening a bottle of wine, offering a gentle distraction. As they gathered around the festive table, Mr. Thompson raised his glass, his voice resonating with the joy of the occasion. "Let's toast to all the good fortunes we've experienced and those yet to come," he declared heartily. In that moment, As the preparations for the feast continued, Logan found himself reflecting on the tumultuous events of the past year. Standing up, his smile broad and sincere, he turned to Mr. Thompson. "Without your intervention a year ago, none of this would have been possible," Logan acknowledged, his gaze settling on his glass of champagne. "I might have spiraled into despair, losing myself and missing the chance to meet Samantha and offer her my help. For your wisdom and guidance, I am eternally grateful." "This toast is for you, Mr. Thompson," he said, his voice imbued with deep gratitude. "To happiness," Mr. Thompson whispered, lifting his glass higher. "To our happiness," echoed Samantha, their glasses raised in a harmonious chorus. Mr. Thompson had become more than just a neighbor to Logan and Samantha. He was an integral part of their family tapestry. His visits to the young couple's home were frequent and filled with a warmth that only someone with a generous heart could bring. Often, he would arrive with a twinkle in his eye, eager to spend time with little Charlie, who had grown particularly fond of the kindly old man. For Logan and Samantha, Mr. Thompson's presence was a blessing. His advice, often dispensed over cups of tea or during leisurely strolls in the park, was invaluable. The couple also noticed how Mr. Thompson's eyes lit up when he was with Charlie. It was as if the child brought a renewed sense of purpose and joy into his life. In turn, Charlie's laughter and energy seemed to rejuvenate the elderly man, infusing him with a youthful spirit. As time passed, Mr. Thompson became like a grandfather to them, a role he embraced with all the love and enthusiasm in his heart. His relationship with Logan, Samantha, and little Charlie deepened, marked by a series of small but significant moments that wove him seamlessly into the fabric of their family life. Mr. Thompson was there for Charlie's milestones, his first words, his first steps, each celebrated with joy and pride, as if he were his own flesh and blood. He would often bring small gifts for Charlie, nothing extravagant, but each one chosen with thought and care. A hand-carved wooden toy, a book full of colourful pictures, each gift was a token of his deep affection. Perhaps most touching was the way he spoke of them to others. To his friends and acquaintances, he referred to Logan, Samantha, and Charlie as my family. There was no blood relation, but the bonds of affection and respect they shared were as strong as any kinship. In return, Logan, Samantha, and Charlie filled a void in Mr. Thompson's life. They gave him a sense of belonging and purpose in his later years, a family to care for and love. His days were brighter and more meaningful because of their presence in his life. One day, Logan whisked his family away for a joyful evening at their favorite local family restaurant. The bell above the restaurant door tinkled merrily as Logan, accompanied by Samantha, Charlie, and Mr. Thompson, stepped inside. The warmth of the eatery, with its inviting aroma of home-cooked meals and the soft hum of conversation, enveloped them. As they looked around for a suitable table, Logan's eyes unexpectedly met those of Harper, his ex-wife, now working there as a waitress. The recognition was instant, and a flicker of surprise crossed Harper's face before she quickly busied herself with her duties. Mr. Thompson, ever observant, leaned closer to Logan. "Someone you know?" he inquired softly, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Yes, that's Harper, my ex-wife," Logan replied quietly, his voice neutral, devoid of any bitterness. Before they could settle into their seats, Harper approached, her demeanor a blend of professional courtesy and personal awkwardness. "Logan, She started, her voice wavering slightly. She glanced briefly at Samantha, and then at Charlie, who was busily chattering with Mr. Thompson about the festive decorations. "There's no need to explain, Harper. Logan interrupted gently, his eyes kind yet resolute. That's in the past. We've both moved on. Harper nodded, her eyes briefly moist. I'm glad you found happiness, she said, her gaze lingering on the family group. Mr. Thompson, sensing the emotional undercurrents of the exchange, chimed in with his characteristic warmth. Life has a way of teaching us valuable lessons, often through unexpected paths, he said, offering Harper a reassuring smile. Yes, it does, Harper agreed, returning his smile with a semblance of her former self. She quickly took their orders, her composure regained, and retreated to the kitchen. As Harper walked away, Mr. Thompson placed a comforting hand on Logan's shoulder. You've handled that with great dignity, Logan. The past may shape us, but it's the present that truly matters, he remarked sagely. Logan nodded in agreement, his heart full of gratitude for the life he had now, with Samantha, Charlie, and the invaluable presence of Mr. Thompson. The encounter with Harper was a poignant reminder of his journey, but the joy and love at his table were a testament to the beautiful present